Hello, my name is Natalia Fedan. I'm a psychologist from Poland, and I'd like to tell you about step 2 of self-reg, which is recognize the stressors. First of all, I think we need to take a look at all the steps, uh, as the stress detective in step 2 needs to know why we are doing step 2. Why? What for? So the first step was read and reframe the behavior. Uh, the stress detective knows that the behavior is just the top of the mountain, so to say, of the iceberg, and below there are lots of reasons why the child is in the limbic state, why the child or the adult is behaving in such a way, and what we can actually do about it, right? So the stress detective knows that the behavior is probably limbic, or assumes that the behavior is limbic, and asks the question why. Then he looks for the stressors. And then, well, he does it or she does it in order to reduce the stress later. And uh, they reduce the stress in order to be for the child to be able to reflect, to enhance stress awareness, and in order to be able to respond, to develop personal strategies to reduce tension and restore energy. So recognizing the stressors, I think, should be done with the awareness that we're actually doing it because we need to do the other steps. Um, well, in this step, we're asking why. Why and why now? Which means that we dig deeper than behavior and focus on the stressors, the reasons. I think we need to define stress. If we are to look for stressors, in self-reg we are back to Cannon's definition. Stress is anything that challenges our homeostasis, which is balance, and the stressor is anything that requires us to burn energy in order to keep internal systems running smoothly. Um, Let me explain it to you on an example of, let's say, relax on the beach. Just imagine for a while you're lying on the beach and you feel perfectly well. All the jobs that you were supposed to do are already done, so there's nothing to worry about. You're lying on a reclining chair, well, maybe with a drink in your hand, soft drink. Um, the temperature is perfectly all right. The wind is blowing smoothly, but very delicately. It's not too strong. You've just eaten a meal, but you're just fine. You've not overeaten yourself. You're in a company of a very nice person, and you feel safe with that person. In the company of that person, you feel just fine. Um, you don't even think of anything specific, anything that could worry you. Perfect balance. And now, in this situation, suddenly the wind starts blowing stronger. There are clouds in the sky suddenly, and from somewhere behind you, you hear voices. You don't know the language, but the voices seem a little angry. Um, you see a family. They are probably quarreling, maybe. You don't even know. You cannot really read the body language as you're not familiar with the body language of the people who live in that country. And also, you start feeling a little hungry, maybe again. And the person who's sitting with you suddenly starts behaving in a very strange way, because he starts or she starts saying, well, last week you really shouldn't have done that. You don't even remember what it was. And so it goes on, right? Every single thing that happened, the wind, the voices of the strangers, the hunger or the strange feeling in your stomach, the person's behavior, all of them are stressors, right? Probably in different domains. You may also have some internal stressors because, for example, suddenly it comes to your mind that you haven't really finished the project that you were supposed to do. There is one thing to do, right? So this would be an internal stressor. So summing it up, stress can be positive or negative. For example, if you are just hungry on the beach, maybe it would have mobilized you to stand up and go get something to eat, right? They can be overt or hidden. You may be aware that the wind is a stressor for you, or you may not, but still the nervous system would react. They can be physiological or psychological, right? So the hunger is physiological, and the sudden anxiety about what's happening nearby is a psychological stressor. They can be internal or external, right? They can be inside you, like anxiety, for example, or hunger, or they can be external, the voices, right? The angry voices, or the wind, or cold. They can be self-imposed, like the thought or the project, or forced upon you, right? Like, for example, the need to react to what the person sitting behind next to you is saying. Or you could get a call from your boss. Well, you haven't really finished that project, right? That would be forced upon you. And it's important to remember that we may not feel the stress consciously, but at the same time, our nervous system may react to it. And the hidden stressors might be more important in this respect for the stress detective. Because it's not really difficult to say, well, I'm stressed about the project, right? You cannot really reduce the project, right, if you want to achieve something. But you may have other hidden stressors that you are not aware of that are taking away your energy. Look, each of these stressors that happened took away a little of your energy, and it really depends on your reactivity and on the resources of energy, uh, whether you react and whether you suddenly go limbic in a specific moment. The same goes for children. I think it's really important to stress that stress, not all stress is bad. There is some level of stress which can be mobilizing, which can be helpful, which can help you achieve the optimum level of tension uh, in order to do some job. For some jobs, like for some tasks, like mundane tasks, you may need more stress to really keep you focused. And for difficult tasks, you may need a lower level of stress. And um, well, it really sometimes depends also on the attitude, on whether you treat stress as problems or whether you treat it as challenge. But at the same time, the attitude may depend on the level of energy you've got, right? So it's all a bit more complicated than just saying, your attitude depends on energy, or the other way around. Um, where do we look for stressors? The stress detective looks into 5 domains, which have effect on one another, and stressors from specific domains make stressors from other domains stronger. So the arrows that are drawn here should actually go in all directions, not just one. Well, I try to make it simple, but you need to be aware that, for example, prosocial stress may affect the cognitive domain, or the cognitive domain stressors can affect also biological. Definitely, Well, I think the biological domain is the most important of the domains. This is where the stress detective should look first, especially when there are problems in other domains, because the biological domain actually determines how much energy we have, and also it is the first channel of contact with the world. Because basically, to me, there are two types of stressors in this domain. First of them concerns, first group concerns the condition of your body, how much energy you've got, which is um, which is to do with the diet, with the quality of sleep, with physical activity, with the state of your health. So this is the first part. And the other group of stressors concerns the stimuli, the sensory stimuli. Uh, well, our senses are the first, so to say, channel through which we have contact with the world. So if there is something wrong with our sensory um, systems, then it's the world is more threatening, right? So take a look for a while at the list of stressors here and think which of them are stressors for you. What other stressors can you think of as well? You may want to stop the video when I ask the questions and have some time to think. Um, well, to me, um, definitely wrong diet is a stressor. A diet with lots of sugar. If I eat sugar, then it really takes a toll. Um, and senses, I think noise. Okay, what about you? Now, thinking about emotion domain, it's getting a little bit more complex because actually every strong emotion is a stressor in self-reg, in the understanding of self-reg. Because every strong emotion activates the limbic system, the nervous system, the um, the sympathetic nervous system, and so far in the self-control paradigm, there were two ways of dealing with emotions: either suppressing them or tackling them head-on. While in self-reg, we think of another way. We need to check where we are on the Theia matrix. Are we well rested? Do we have enough energy to tackle the emotions? Um, do they appear because we lack energy? And then we need to ask another question. If the emotions are really, really strong, first we need to think, what can I do to raise my energy level? Because dealing with emotions is easier when you have enough energy. And then, after you've raised your energy level in the biological domain, possibly, then you might want to come back to the emotions. Another set of questions which you might want to ask is which emotions you experience most frequently, which of them you find more difficult to deal with, and when do you experience them? Um, we may also want to remember that new and complex emotions might be stressors, especially to children. Well, the need to suppress emotions might be a stressor as well, and emotions which you don't understand become also more threatening. So we might want to remember that. Another domain, the cognitive domain, is also a bit complex because apart from the stressors which are actually in that domain, um, we might want to look for stressors in other domains when we have problems in the cognitive. because the cognitive domain has its roots in the biological domain and in the emotion domain. It's really important to remember that when you're calm, you're able to learn things in a minute. And when you're overstressed, the learning ability is not there. The same goes for creativity. The same goes for focus, for concentration. It's really easier when you've got the energy. There is this mechanism of the limbic braking. When the sugar level in your blood drops below a certain level, then your brain switches to limbic. And this is why some children or some adults may suddenly drop the task. So the solutions to this domain are often in the other domains. But also there are some stressors which are the part actually really cognitive. For example, the inability to see the patterns. Then reducing the stressors may be about helping the child to see the patterns. Information coming from the modality a kid has problems with. So here we've got this nexus, the biological domain, the cognitive domain, sensory stimuli which are difficult to process, but also too much information to process or too many stages, information given too slow or too fast, concentrating for too long. So which of them are stressors for you, and what other stressors can you think of? To me, definitely information given too slow, which is why I prefer reading to listening, right? Because then while reading I can skip, I can make it faster, and I cannot when listening. uh, um, I found my own way to deal with that stressor. I take notes, which takes a lot of time, so it slows me down a bit. As far as social domain is concerned, I like to explain it together with the pro-social domain, because I actually think they are two sides of the same coin. The social domain to me is more about the sort of cognitive being in the group. It's about understanding what's going on in the group, what's going on around you, about understanding social cues, uh, understanding how your own actions affect others, understanding what needs to be done in specific situations. So some social um, behaviors, right? Stressors here can be the inability to understand the social cues, the influence of your own actions, but also violence, being the witness or the victim, interpersonal conflicts, disorienting or difficult social situations. I think for this domain, the really important question is, what kind of situations do you find stressful, and which do you find quite the opposite? Because we need other people, but at the same time, contact with them may be our stressor. To me, for example, a stressor is being in a large group of people, right? Because there are a lot of, it's actually my energy zapper, but at the same time, I need those sometimes. So I think it's important to know whether social situations like that are a stressor. Well, for some of you, it may not be a stressor. There are some people who like social gatherings, huge groups, and it energizes them, right? So I think it's important to know. And the same for kids. It's important to know, uh, well, what helps them in this respect. For the prosocial domain, to me, is a bit like more emotional being in the group. Um, Also, it's concerned with the moral sense, with the sense of what's good and what's bad. And it's also about being a part of the group. I think prosocial domain is more than just being a person in the group. It's more about being a part of the group, about resonating, about empathy. So here, the stressors are basically strong emotions of the other people around. Empathy is a huge energy zapper. Conflict of values, sense of guilt is especially typically Polish, I think, stressor. Sense of injustice, morally ambiguous issues. And I think it's important to remember in this domain that the tricky part is that the antisocial behaviors, which are problems, children's problems in the prosocial domain, may be a huge stressor in the prosocial domain for adults. So it may make it difficult to play the role of the stress detective. So I think it's important to ask yourself the question, which behaviors do I find especially stressful? Is it, for example, lying, hitting other kids? Um, is it the lack of empathy? For me, it's a huge stressor. Somebody's lack of empathy towards other people. I find it really an energy zapper. So then you may want to ask the question, why? Why is this particular behavior a stressor for me? And how do I normally react? And how do my reactions work for me and for my child and for my student? Okay, in the short term and in the long term, because there are some situations which will probably make us more disciplinary or withdrawn. So and that can be a stressor for the child, which may make it more difficult for the child to develop in the prosocial domain. So now, summing it up, I think the last task for you is to make a list of stressors which particularly use up your energy. Make it at least 10 stressors, but you can make it as long as you wish. Try to think into which category they fit, but sometimes you may feel like it's really difficult to classify some of them, so you may also make a category, uh, the stressors which are difficult to classify. It's not really that important. It's important to know that it's a stressor and that you may want to reduce some of the stress. And after you've done it, compare your list with somebody else, maybe with your child, maybe with your partner, maybe with somebody you know well, with your friend, um, and try to think about how much we differ and how much we are similar. Are you different? Are you similar? Can you see some stressors which for somebody else are not stressors, or maybe they are even energizers? So yeah, I'll leave you with that task. Thank you for listening, and probably see you in other films as well. Bye.